and I'm costing my parents all this money for tests that just aren't showing anything and therapy that isn't working. And, you know, I'm not a person to these insurance companies. I'm not a person. I'm just, a name. And I know they have so many charts to go through and it's nothing personal, but why be a human if nobody recognizes that I am? The people that I needed to see me as human most aren't helping me.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Mary Flint. So as a reminder, Mary is a classically trained pianist and has been since the age of 6. She also discovered her love of writing from a lifelong love of stories. Inspired by the books and success of teenage author Christopher Paolini, she began writing her first book, Red Star: The Hunter Trials, at the age of 15 and published it just 2 years later. Mary hopes that readers will enjoy exploring the characters and their worlds as much as she does. She also enjoys interacting with Red Star fans at conventions, book signings, and online. Mary currently writes from her home in South Texas, USA. Before we hear this part 2 of Mary's conversation, did you know I created some Warrior Words merch? You know, the t-shirt, hat, water bottle, sticker, that kind of stuff. You can find all of those in my Fourth Wall shop. And it is kind of a complicated URL. So I'm going to put that in the show notes for you so you can click directly on it. So now you can wear your warrior wings or carry your warrior sword wherever you go. And if you pick something up from that site, please post it on Instagram and tag me at My Warrior Words. All right, so grab a tissue and join Mary and me as we finish our conversation about how she pivoted from her medical crisis to a brand new dream. Let's rock.
I get a new primary care, and that's one where he's like, okay, if I can't diagnose you with whatever is actually going on, but you probably have POTS, you probably have fibromyalgia. So let's start there. We get a pain medication. It works great. It's not addictive. It's not gabapentin. It doesn't make me drowsy. I'm in therapy, dealing with the depression, dealing with the anxiety. COVID's doing pretty well at this point. I go to in-person physical therapy at a facility where they have all the stuff.
Right.
And I felt pretty great. I was doing fantastic. I was walking on my own and, folding laundry by myself. I could pick up my dogs. And I was like, okay, this is it. I'm good waiting for a specialist. Like, I feel great.
Yeah.
Come January of 2022, everything gets really, really bad again. And this was, I'm getting mixed up. This was before the inpatient physical therapy, but the last time I went to the ER, because it was really, really bad, I was looking at a wheelchair. Like not just for, until you get your first couple physical therapy sessions and the muscles are coming back and you can use your walker, but like if I want to do anything more than, 10, 15 steps, I need a wheelchair because, and, but then also, okay, I need a wheelchair, but I can't push it myself because my shoulders are weak and my arms are weak. Um, and that was really hard at first. Um, but I look at my life and I was like, well, I can't go do anything. I had siblings come to visit with nieces and nephews, and they're going to the botanical gardens and they're going to the beach. And, I could go to the beach and sit in a chair and watch them look for seashells and watch them play in the water. And, but botanical gardens, I can't walk that far. I could maybe walk from the parking lot to the entrance and be like, well, that was great.
Yeah.
Time to go home. Um, and so my primary care is like, you know what? I think I want a wheelchair because at this point, at least somebody could push me and I could maybe feel like a human again and go to the grocery store
Right.
or, go to church, just do something. Um, within COVID safety stuff because I still have to be careful about being sick. Um, but so did all that physical therapy. I was like, okay, wheelchair's behind me. I'm fine. I'm good. Lo and behold, gets bad again. Um, and not bad enough that I like have to go back to the ER, but just bad enough that it's like, okay, I need to use my walker again. Um, you know what? I'm doing this event. I think I need my wheelchair. My insurance wouldn't pay for a wheelchair because I could manage with a walker, so I we got one secondhand. Um, and once again, I thought I was depressed before. I thought I was anxious before. Um,
Just all comes back
yeah,
with every new, gosh, I don't want to say the word development, but every new time something happens, it just all comes
yeah.
back.
I
Yeah.
just want to feel like okay, I'm finally like I've been stable for X amount of time. It's not coming back. Like this is great. Boom, everything's back. Um, and once again, I wanted to be done. I've worked this hard. I still can't play the piano like I used to. I still can't play the violin like I used to. Um, I can't even think about going to school right now because when am I going to study? Um, Not to mention the trauma of trying to do school again after being in school in the hospital, and all those feelings that come with it. Um, and it was when it got bad after that really good stretch. That's when I finally admitted to both myself and to my therapist that I wanted to die. The good parts of the last year didn't matter. Um, and not even just the physical side of things, but I'd been, at that point, I'd been severely depressed and severely anxious for 2 years straight. I had a little lift when I started doing better. And what good is life if I'm not even happy living it? Um, and I'm costing my parents all this money for tests that just aren't showing anything, and therapy that isn't working. And, you know, I'm not a person to these insurance companies. I'm not a person. I'm just, a name. And I know they have so many charts to go through, and it's nothing personal, but why be a human if nobody recognizes that I am? The people that I needed to see me as human most aren't helping me. Um, and maybe I am crazy. Maybe it is all in my head and it's never going to get better. Um, and, I was scared of death. I was scared of dying. So it never got much farther than that. But I thought about going farther than that. And I got a really bad eating disorder um, from just, I had trouble with it a little bit in high school. And then you can't exercise and it comes back with a vengeance because everything out of my life is out of control. But and I think it's a combination of, how do I keep my body healthy if I can't exercise and I need to control something in my life? Something needs to be on my terms. Um, but also, every other doctor I'm seeing is saying something about like, well, it's you're depressed. Do some exercise and you'll feel better. I can't walk, but thank you.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
or, you know, eat healthy, get your vitamins, and I'm sure this will all clear up. And so I'm panicking about anything I put in my body that's not healthy because, well, now I'm just proving them right because I am eating unhealthy food. And of course, my body's not going to like that. And it's going to make everything worse. And it's,
Vicious cycle.
yeah. And there's no way out of it. It's just, I did not see a moment in time where I could possibly be happy with my life or my body the way it was. I My brain was broken and my heart was broken and my body was broken. And like Humpty Dumpty, all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put this entire mess back together again, ever. It was never going to stop in my mind. Um, but I went to a writer's retreat when I was still in the thick of this. And I met some really amazing people there. Um, and I made some really good friends. And turns out, that writer's retreat had a writer's group attached to it that did Zooms every week. Um, and I lived for those Zoom calls. So I could get lost in everybody's stories that they were reading. Uh, they also hadn't really been into reading as much once I graduated college. And, I had books of my own. I'd been trying to publish the second one, and my health had to take the front seat. And I was so depressed I couldn't write either. I couldn't write, I couldn't draw, I couldn't play the piano, I couldn't express myself in any way. would I go to this writer's retreat at this beautiful ranch. And there's people there that have been depressed like I was and had really hard backgrounds. And um, I wrote for the first time in, a year, 2 years at that ranch. And writing was all I had left. Um, if I couldn't play the piano, maybe I could write. Um, maybe this could be my career. Um, and the teaching author at this writers retreat was one of my childhood um, favorite authors, Richard Paul Evans. Um, and first day there, he tells you, you know, it, I respect you too much to lie to you. Um, before he starts giving pointers on everybody's feedback, because he tells us, it's because I want you to succeed. I want you to, you can't succeed if everybody's just telling you. If I'm saying nice things,
Right.
I'm going to be nice about it, but I will tell you the truth. um, and I got some feedback on my cover that was very truthful, very nice, but very truthful.
Yes, he's good at that.
Yes, yes. But I knew he was telling the truth. He wasn't going to lie to us. He did respect us too much to lie to us. Um, so we each get to ask a question. Um, you know, because you say, what's the thing you're looking for the most? Um, and so it was my turn. I said, cliff notes of what happened. Basically just the way my life is looking right now. This is the only career I maybe have a shot of being able to function in that I think I love so much. I'm scared to love it, but I love it. Um, and it's all I have left. So I need you to tell me truthfully, can I do this? Can I have a career where I am an author and I'm making enough money that this is my day job? Can I do this? Um, and he looked me in the eyes and said, truthfully, you are going to have to work harder than you have ever worked in your entire life. But yes, you can do this. You can make it. Um, and I held on to that so tightly. um, yeah. And honestly, that and those friends I made there were most of the reason why I'm still alive. um, it was that change I needed. It was because I lost my community with my piano. My friends from college, they all moved. They were doing great, wonderful things, and I'm so happy for them. But they're gone. Um, and but now I had a family, for lack of a better word, but they are a family to me now. And if maybe I can't get out of bed, but everybody on Tuesday is going to miss me and worry about me if I'm not there. So yeah, I'll drag a brush through my hair and put on a clean shirt and be happy for an hour on Tuesday and listen to fun stories and then we'll rest and try and be there again next Tuesday. And that was my life for a long time.
Well, if people are doing the math, I said that I had known you for about 3 years, and it was in 2022, and then we are now in 2025. And while I have not been at that Tuesday night meeting for a little while now, that's where we met.
Yes, it
And
is.
and that's where I got to listen to you read your story. And I'm sitting here crying now because I love how your story has evolved and turned around. Um, but two, we started this conversation with you talking about storytelling, about how your music was storytelling, and now you still get to tell stories. And
Yeah.
and that's just, I ask about beauty a lot, and that to me right there is beauty, because you were able to pivot from something you loved and worked so hard at, and then had to, I think it's almost you had to accept, and I don't like the word death, but the death of that dream as it was, in
Yeah.
order to embrace this new one. But you're still
Yeah.
storytelling. You're still creating magic, and you're still creating emotion through your words and your stories. So, do you want to share a little bit about your stories?
It does, kind of directly correlate to everything. 'Cause, I had this, when I was 8 years old, I had this, this idea of a girl in a big, wide meadow with really long grass, as tall as she was, holding fire in her hands. Um, and I was like, okay, that's cool. But I would just kind of think about this from time to time, and gradually other pieces started to come into it. Um, I had two characters instead of one, and then I had three, and I had four. Um, and I was really into drawing at the time, but I couldn't draw it out, and I tried writing it, and I was like, well, that's a steaming pile of garbage. Let's never do that again. But I kept building the story. Um, I would write the prologue every couple of years and hate it and throw it out. And a couple of years I'd be like, well, maybe I'll try again. Nah, still hate it, throw it out. Um, had some siblings and some important people in my life start writing, and it's kind of this, and be like, wow, I didn't like that chapter at first, but now that he's been writing for a while, and it's actually pretty good. And it's like this oh duh moment of like, I'm a musician, practice is my life. Maybe I should practice writing and see if it gets any better. um,
Oh,
and it's a story of um, these kids on a dead planet in an underground city where they're locked into things. Um, and it was missing a piece, and I couldn't figure out what that piece was. I tried fantasy. Fantasy didn't work. It's sci-fi. Well, it's kind of both. And I'm gonna set it on Earth. No, Earth doesn't work. I need my own thing. But I was missing this spark. I didn't know what it was. And then I was a teenager. And I was a good kid, okay? I prided myself on being a good kid. I'm the second youngest of 8 kids. I was determined not to repeat some of the mistakes of my older siblings, which really just made room for my own, but
right, right.
I tried. And I turned into a teenager, and all of a sudden you're the one that, the shopkeeper's kind of like keeping an eye on you in the mall and like, hey, I have this idea. And the adults would be like, oh, that's nice. It wouldn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, I did all the thinking. Like, here's how it would work. This is how it's gonna work. And, pat on the head, that's nice. Yeah, you're just a kid. And or just, you know, somebody would talk to me to my parents and they turn to me and be like, oh, make sure you're good to your parents. Like, I don't know. It was weird, like that people would just assume they would know who I was just because I was, 13, 14, 15. And no matter how hard I worked to prove that, I'm a respectable kid, I think these through, there's always going to be a barrier there. Um, and you turn on the news and kids these days, and that's the generation that eats the Tide Pods. We're doomed as a society, you know. I just feel like, well, most of us didn't eat the Tide Pods, my friends. Um, and spite is a very powerful motivator. That was the spark I needed. To sit down at my little school laptop and be like, I want to tell a story about my perspective as a kid trying to do something good and maybe what would happen if people actually listened to that. Trying to get people to understand that, you know, kids, the young generation isn't the downfall of our society. They're our greatest hope for continuation. They're our greatest hope for new things, for change. And so I started writing this story and I stuck with it that time. I practiced, I revised, and kind of true to my um, vision, I published it when I was a senior in high school. That was really big for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Not too many high school seniors do that.
yeah, I was homeschooled. I had a lot of time on my hands. But I was determined. I was like, I'm getting this out before I graduate because, once again, spite, powerful motivator. um, and I dropped off a little bit as I went to college because piano and college is a lot of work, and my parents were helping me pay for it. So I prioritized my grades over,
Yeah.
writing for a little while. And I was like, this is going to be great, to explore alongside my real muggle job, teaching. Um, and so that's the project that was in motion in 2020 was my second book. I finally finished it and was, editing it, getting it ready. Um, and there's kind of like these three main characters. One of them's a villain, one of them's a 15-year-old girl, and they're both pretty spunky. Um, they've had it hard, and they're rough, they're tough, but they're learning. Andresha, the main character, she starts off really kind of mean, but she grows to, she learns, she grows. But she's very, she's a survivor. She had already survived her hardest moments. And same with this villain, she took a very different path, but she survived her hardest moments, and this is what it made her into. But then there was the other main character, Edrix. And I'm not a person where, like, my characters are myself. Like, I don't self-insert myself into one character. They all have little pieces of me. But Edrix is kind of who I gravitated towards the most. He's an artist. Yeah, he was a painter and a drawer, and I was a musician, but we were both artists.
Yeah.
And his story is similar to mine. His mom was his first painting teacher, or my mom was my first piano teacher. And, bad stuff happened to him in the first book and all that, but he was just this cheerful, hopeful person. He was the one in the dynamic where, Andresha's like, well, we're dead now. He's like, well, we said that, 10 chapters before and we're still alive. So I can make it out of this, or, all hope isn't lost. We can keep doing this. Very selfless. Um, and I did kind of put him through some really bad stuff. In book two, he gets tortured and all this stuff. Um, but part of it, then I got sick and I had this block. Um, and whenever I tried to write that third book, whenever I tried to write Edric's, he wasn't the Edric's from the first two books. He was angry and he was, quite frankly, depressed. I didn't realize it at the time because I was still learning everything that I was feeling. Um, but it felt like this negativity was leaching out of me into the pages. And I'm like, that's not Edric's. I can't put that in Edric's. He's not supposed to carry that. Um, he's one that says, if anything, Andresha should be the depressed one. Like, I don't know. I can't write this. I can't write this until I'm feeling better. Um, but and then the first thing I wrote for the first time is it was very dark. Um, it did scare me a little bit. Um, but it's like, well, okay, I don't know. And I was kind of holding back because I'm scared. And like, people are gonna read this book. Like, how am I supposed to put this in a book and give it to people to read? And it's so heavy. And like, I made the decision that I was just gonna wait and I was gonna, cut those parts out and wait until I was feeling better and Edric's could be Edric's again. And I am the type of author where I feel like my characters talk to me. I'll be like, I would say that, or too bad you plotted this. We're going left instead of right. You wanted us to not blow that up? Too bad. We are blowing everything up. Um, so I almost had this moment of sitting here looking at the page. I'm gonna erase it. Even though I never erase things, I always put it in the scrap bin. I was gonna erase it. And it was like Edric's came and flicked me between the eyes and said, "How dare you? Like, first of all, look what you did to me. I'm supposed to be fine after all of that." I'm like, well, no, but it's like, then let me tell my story. You can't you can't change my story from how it's supposed to be. um, you've trusted us for this long. We've been friends for so long, since you were a kid. Trust that I can carry this too. You've given us your hopes, you've given us your dreams. I can handle your darkness. If I'm as strong as you think I am, let me prove it. And, with Edric's, I had to learn how to be angry. I had to learn how to be sad. But all this blackness that was, stirring up and boiling and festering. And I'd always found, that's what I relied on music to do because it feels so big. How can I possibly put this into words that will possibly convey what this is? Um, but I learned to bleed on the pages. And I could get all that blackness and all that darkness out of me. And I could put it into the paper because paper doesn't have feelings. Paper doesn't care how mean you are to it. If it's something really terrible, I can erase it. Um, so I could put it all out on the pages. And I told myself, okay, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna delete anything until the first draft is done. That's the promise I made. I'm gonna see it through. And by gosh, by golly, it turned into something beautiful. And I went back to that writer's retreat a couple years later, in fact, last year. And I read that first really dark part that I had written, which was, spiraling from being suicidal into an anxiety attack. And I'd written it just coming off of an anxiety attack, screaming, crying, throwing things in my closet. And probably the scariest 5 minutes of my entire life, because these are my friends. They know I've had some struggles, but they don't know how bad. And every single person in that room had tears in their eyes. And I realized that I was a magician again. And yeah, it's a shared story this time. But I had, a good friend of mine say, I've been the boy on the floor, having that panic attack. And that's exactly how I felt. But then I also had people come up to me and say, I have, family members that say they struggle with anxiety, and I have never understood how that felt until right now. You described it so well. I understand them better. And so even though it was such a dark thing, it was still that moment of refuge that I had grown accustomed to creating with my music. People were finding it in my words. And that is the greatest blessing I could ever be given from this, is that I still have my magic, and my magic is real, even if it's a fictional story made out of ink on paper that used to be a tree. It's still mine, but it can also be everyone else's.
Yes. And you used your words and your storytelling and your magic to help other people feel, or at least understand, what other people feel in those situations. And that's beautiful. That's pure beauty. And I'm sniffly. So wow. I'm not sure. And here's another moment where the audio podcaster is speechless, not knowing exactly where to go. But I sat here listening to you, and I'm just in awe. If people are watching us on video, they could probably tell that I am old enough to be your mother.
You don't look it.
Well, thank you. I much appreciate that. But
I respect you too much to lie to you.
Maybe I'll have to go to Rick now and say, that phrase just came back to bite me. Um, but and the funny thing is I was going somewhere with that statement, and now I can't remember where, where I was going to go. Okay, so if we could just explain to the listeners, these Tuesday night meetings that we've referenced a few times is each participant gets to read 5 minutes of what they've written. So you get a snapshot. You don't get, 3 chapters. You get a snapshot. And so I have listened to Mary read multiple times, and every time her 5 minutes was up, I'd be like, no, I want more. I want more of this. Because you really are good with those words and combining those words with the emotions um and then not disguising it because you're not hiding it, but in a story, in an innocent little story where people can read it and just enjoy it for the story, or they can read it and really feel your heart and feel the emotions and the experiences. And yeah, that's magic. That is magic.
Very
So
simple.
mhm. And so I am so grateful that that you were very vulnerable with us today. And I just, yeah, I'm still I still have tears on the rims of my eyelids. But so is book three finished? Where are you with this book three?
Out to beta readers. Yeah.
Okay.
And then incorporating their feedback, finish polishing up the ending, and then finally the world gets to see it. I'm gonna have to be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you put quite a bit of it out there today, so hopefully that will intrigue a lot of people. Maybe I'm going to encourage everybody to go out and get books 1 and 2 so that they're ready for book 3. So what is the name of your series?
It's Red Star, and the first book is The Hunter Trials.
Yeah.
I'm always prepared. If you're watching on video, I have the beautiful cover.
That is, yeah, the revised the
Yes,
revised I respect
the
you
new
too much.
beautiful.
Uh,
Even though I did like my old one, it has a special place in my heart. It always will.
mhm.
Um, but yeah,
And you'll
I
probably
love this
keep,
one just as much.
yeah, and you'll keep one of those old covers always and
Oh
forever.
yes. Oh yes.
Never to be sold.
Always to be mine.
Always. So how can people find you? I'm going to put the links to the books in the show notes, but how can people connect with you?
I'm at Mary Flint author everywhere. I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook, and getting more active on TikTok and YouTube. Um, but wherever you find me, I'm always happy you're there. I'll I'll become active. If I see people there, I'll be like, ah,
Yay!
friends.
And friends are good. And I am learning that even I think 2020 taught this to well, most of us, that friends are friends, whether they're on these screens or whether they're in person. And while we've never met in person, I've always considered you a friend because we have connected through our stories. And I think that's what's so powerful about sharing stories, whether we do it in books or whether we do it on podcasts or the stage or through music or art or anywhere that we share our stories. So one last question that I'd like to ask you is, if you were speaking to one person who was facing maybe the end of their dream, and you were to give them some advice, what would you say to them?
think the first thing I would say is, first of all, however your brain and your body are feeling, whether it's being depressed or angry or, sad, however intense those are, however awful they feel, that's normal. It's normal and it's necessary. Because we do have to grieve the part of ourselves that we've lost. And we're not supposed to just be happy about that. Now, sure, if putting on a positive face to other people helps you, go for it. But not feel for 1 second that you are not allowed to be angry or to be sad or to be upset. Because we have to feel those things, we have to get them out. We have to pull up the weeds before we can replant the garden. And then the second thing I would say is it does not feel like it right now. It might not for a very long time that this heaviness will ever get lighter, that I will ever learn to love something as much as what I have lost, or for life to have that spark again. Because I was in that exact same place. And I am amazed at how wrong I was. Because, those 3 years where I was in severe depression and severe anxiety are mostly a blur. I can't pick out a lot of specific things about them because they just felt like eternities, like they would never end. But it's already been 5 years since I first got sick. And it's been about a year and a half since I had my last really bad depressive spiral. I'm officially, mild on the little questionnaires they give you. And not only do I love my writing, but I'm genuinely happy. I'm the happiest I've ever been. And it's not the same as it was. Going to the doctor is always going to be very hard for me. Going to the hospital is always going to be very hard for me. I still have trauma. I still have all these things that, I still don't know exactly what's wrong with me. I still don't know if there's going to be other things in the future that I lose or I can't have, or if I'll get really bad again or worse than I ever was. But I have my thing that I can use to cope with that. And just this last week, I played a piano solo in public. And no, it was nothing like what I used to play. I had to work on it in, 15-minute increments because my hands do still get tired very quickly. Little passages in there that I used to just be able to play without a blink. I had to work really hard on them. But I played and I did that magic again, where people felt something. And so as long as this moment feels to you right now, it is only a moment. And if you have to live 1 second at a time to get through that moment, do that. Because your life is worth fighting for And who is going to work your, no one else can bring your magic to the world if you're not in it.
So true. Then you made me cry again. Thank you, Mary. I know it's not easy to admit all the things that you admitted today, and I feel both blessed and honored that you were able and willing to share with whoever listens. And I just pray that your words will hit somebody's heart when they need to hear them, and that they will live through that moment, even if it is 1 second at a time. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Heather. You are a very strong person, and your story is one of many that gave me the courage to tell my own.
Thank you. And one day mine will be published like yours.
And I will be
One day.
front of the line wanting to get your signature in it.
And you shall have it. And you shall have it. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Mary. I can't appreciate you more than, I don't know. Now I'm fumbling with my own words now. So thank you.
I have brain fog. I do it too. Don't worry. We're all friends here.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
As you may be able to tell, Mary is a young adult, but don't let that fool you. In her young life, she has had the opportunity to grow and develop her God-given talent of using music to tell stories and stir emotion. She's dealt with a debilitating, unknown medical condition. And now she uses her God-given storytelling talent to stir emotion in a new way, writing novels. She has dealt with more in her young life than a lot of us do throughout our entire lives. And I found it sad, ironic, I don't know, that she mentioned how some of the adults in her life would just pat her on the head and pay lip service to her dreams when she had so much talent and she'd already demonstrated it. But that's where she used her wisdom and turned spite into motivation. And it came in handy when she needed to pull herself out of a very dark place. Wisdom is not age dependent. Mary's is hard fought and hard won. She was very open and honest with us about the mental health struggles that resulted from her physical health struggles. And I hope and I pray that you heard her pain as she spoke, that you heard also how she found a way to fight for herself. She tried to find something she could do now that, now that she had these physical limitations, and she returned to writing, which was something she did when she was a teenager. She was blessed to be able to attend a writer's retreat with an incredible author who truly cares about the people he mentors. And he cared enough to tell her the truth. Thank you, Richard Paul Evans. Now I realize we can't all go on a retreat, but we can all find a mentor. We can all find someone who cares about us, someone who respects you enough to tell you the truth. A mentor can help you with so many things: planning, figuring things out, education on maybe skills or things you need to develop, friendship, and there's just many more ways that a mentor can help you. Now, one of my absolute favorite quotes from this episode was when Mary said, "No one else can bring your magic to the world if you're not in it. Someone in this world needs you. If you are struggling with anxiety or depression, please help. Please seek help. Please seek help. Tell someone. Let someone help you. When I say at the end of every episode to armor up and fight the good fight, that does not mean you have to do these things alone. Find your mentor. Share with friends or family. Pray and talk to your priest or pastor. Allow someone to help you armor up and fight with you. Something to think about this week. And I will put the National Suicide Hotline in the show notes for you so that you can click on that if you need any help, any answers. Please, please seek help. So until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.